Salam world, I'm a shorter than average girl from down under, and today we're going to be looking at the super underrated 2003 Disney movie, Brother Bear. After the huge success of The Lion King, Disney wanted to make more animal-based stories. And so we get this installment. Brother Bear basically follows the same blueprint as The Lion King, being a personified modernization of a Shakespeare classic, where The Lion King is loosely based off Hamlet, which we'll talk about in a future Lion King video. Brother Bear is meant to be inspired by King Lear. Ever so slightly. But regardless, I think the story of Brother Bear is solid. And its message is the moral outcome we should have learned at the end of The Lion King. But we didn't. So let's get into it. If you're only here for the movie review, you can click to the time shown in the screen right now or the timestamp in the description, whichever suits you best. But for now, let's talk stories. Brother Bear is set in post-LGP Alaska, where three brothers, Sitka, Denahi, and Kenai live. Each brother aims to live by the totem they are given, which brings us to our protagonist, the youngest of the three, Kenai, who is undergoing his maturing ceremony at the start of the movie, and is given the totem of the Bear of Love. Embarrassed and ashamed of the totem that he has received, Kenai impulsively decides to chase the bear who had taken their fish. And unfortunately in the process, his older brother Sitka loses his life. Kenai blames the bear for his brother's death and vows to kill it, despite Denahi's advice against it. In this confrontation, Kenai ends up killing the bear, but Sitka's spirit comes to him, disappointed with his actions. To allow Kenai to understand the consequences of his rash actions and the impact that they would have on the world, he turns Kenai into a bear. Unfortunately for Denahi, who has been following Kenai to try and stop him, finds a bear next to the clothes of his younger brother, and so believes that the bear had just taken the life of his second brother Kenai. So yeah. While Denahi is tracking and trying to kill Kenai, thinking that it's the other bear, Kenai is traveling to the location where he knows the spirits will be, so that he could make sense of the curse that his brother has put on him. On the way, he meets a bear cub called Coda, who was separated from his mother while they were going to the salmon run. And the salmon run just happens to be next to the mountain where the lights touch the earth, the location Kenai is trying to get to. And so now he has a guide.
Tell everybody I'm on my way. Will you stop it?
Originally, Kenai hated Coda's company, but through their travels, he started to warm to him until he realized... Now, this is where I'll ruin the movie's plot twist. If you don't want to know what it is, you can skip to the timestamp shown on the screen right now, which will take you past it. He realizes that the bear that he killed was Coda's mother, who was only trying to feed and protect her little cub. Coda freaks out when he hears this, but when Denahi finally catches up to them, it was Coda who defends Kenai and saves his life. Just then, the spirit of Sitka comes and changes Kenai back into a human. However, Kenai asks Sitka to keep him as a bear so that he could look after Coda. Oh, my heart. I mean, look, Coda is annoying in parts, but he also gets you choked up in others.
My brother's a spirit. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here.
What's your mother's name?
Sitka?
Thanks, Sitka. If it weren't for you, I would have never met Kenai.
Oh.
I always wanted a brother.
And the movie ends by saying,
I passed on the wisdom of his story to our people. The story of a boy who became a man by becoming a bear.
a simple yet touching story with a very heavy subject matter. I mean, what's not to love about it? Unlike King Lear, the story that it is loosely based on, which is about these three sisters who are getting their father the king's inheritance, and then they trash him, and he goes mad. And that's a very crude summary of King Lear, skipping a whole bunch of politics and gouging of eyes that take place. Instead, Brother Bear takes inspiration from the landscape and the original custodians of the land, the Inuits. You see, archaeologically, it doesn't really match up. Where the Inuits are known to have lived in Alaska from about 5000 BCE, the last glacial period ended more than 10,000 years ago. So technically, it would have either been the Athabascan people, or the Tlingit people, the Haida people, the Smushian people, the Aleut people, or the Eskimo. All these people are known to have crossed the Bering Land Bridge 3,500 years ago, which would put them in Alaska around the time where this movie is meant to have taken place. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that Disney tried to take inspiration from the natives of Alaska. It may not have been accurate, but we'll give them brownie points for trying. Personally, I think this inspiration enhanced the story by making it more spiritual and more human. Firstly, the down-to-earth lifestyle of the protagonists makes the story more relatable than these three posh princesses, and a natural higher power provides greater authority than just a king, giving the consequences of disobedience a greater weight. Further, changing the gritty politics with natural order allows for the difficulties being discussed to change from an external mind game to an internal struggle with change and adaptation, which is more of a real and important story to tell. And this is something that Disney also does with The Lion King, but not to the same extent as it does in Brother Bear, primarily because the themes become more difficult for a younger audience to digest. Something I think that critics unfairly criticized about this particular movie. But why don't we just ignore the critics and look at the beauty of this movie instead? Its story. This is the highlight of the movie, not the animation, not the soundtrack, although I personally like parts of the OST, but the journey that these characters take you on. Starting with the in-your-face symbolism used to foreshadow the plot of the story, the totems. Sitka, the oldest brother, had the totem of the Eagle of Guidance, which he says about it,
"You know, I felt the same way when Tanana gave me mine."
Get out of here.
No, really. I said, "The Eagle of Guidance? What does that mean?" But now that I'm older, I know it's about being a leader and keeping an eye on you two.
'Cause he basically raised his siblings, but it goes on to mean a lot more when he uses his spirit power to transform his brother into a bear, or becoming an eagle to lead Denahi to Kenai. But in addition to the name given to us by the movie, understanding a little about the significance of the eagle to the indigenous cultures of the West Coast can add a lot to the way that we perceive Sitka. West Coast nations believe that the eagle is the creature with the closest relationship with the Creator because it flies the highest, allowing it to transcend the physical world to the spiritual. And so the eagle is the messenger of the Creator, sending messages up. An eagle also symbolizes focus, strength, peace, leadership, and the ultimate prestige, the traits that we can see in Sitka. Denahi's totem is the Wolf of Wisdom, something that he doesn't seem to actually act by until Sitka's death. His change in attitude towards Kenai isn't one of blaming, as per se, but one of concern. However, Kenai, in his immature and rageful state, perceived this as a personal attack, leaving Denahi behind in search of the bear. When Denahi lost both of his brothers, other traits of the wolf took over from Wisdom. traits including loyalty and strong family ties. Combined with his intelligence, which is also a trait associated with wolves, Denahi managed to catch up with Kenai at the mountains where the light touched the earth, coming to an understanding, which is also another trait of a wolf, of what has happened and
I passed on the wisdom of his story.
corresponding with the last wolf representations of good communication and education. And now we get to Kenai and the Bear of Love. This, of course, is foreshadowing Kenai's transformation into a bear and his relationship which he develops with his new little brother, Coda. But it also represents his independence yet family-oriented nature, his self-will yet his thoughtfulness, his strength and his courage, even if they're not used in the right way. As Denahi puts it,
The story of a boy who became a man by becoming a bear.
told through the eyes of the material world via Denahi and the spiritual via Sitka. And by looking at the movie in the same way, we find that the story becomes more relatable and inspiring. So let's start by looking at Kenai's life through the eyes of the world, aka Denahi's. We have a teen full of ambition and pride, ready to be recognized as a valuable member of his community through his maturation ceremony. However, when things didn't go his way and his expectations fell short, he felt embarrassed by the results and wanted to prove himself. Even though he really didn't need to prove himself to anyone, his humiliation is causing him to think that others view him as a disappointment. And Denahi teasing him doesn't really help to clear that perspective. Consequently, he makes the rash decision to catch the bear who had taken their fish and their basket, to rectify the mistake that he had made by not tying up the basket properly, as well as to prove his courage and contribution to the tribe. Unfortunately, he went well over his head, and to save his brother, Sitka had to make the ultimate sacrifice. This was a huge blow for Kenai. It doesn't only show that he had failed to secure the basket of fish, he had also led to the death of his brother. These compound emotions of failure and guilt led him to make another irrational decision of killing the bear. It's not that Kenai actually blamed the bear for Sitka's death, but he needed someone else to blame to be useful, worthy of life after his brother had given his one life for his. Kenai was grieving the loss of Sitka. Now, there are 5 stages of grief that people go through, but they aren't a one-way street. People go through the different stages at different times with varying lengths and degrees. And here we can see Kenai in the grieving stage of anger. But after he kills the bear, Kenai lets out this loud cry. After the rage had dissipated, he was now in sorrow and anguish for the loss. Killing the bear hadn't cured what he was feeling. But even when we are at the lowest of the low, we don't get a jail-free card for the consequences of our actions, which is what Kenai needed to learn. His selfish and irrational actions resulted in his brother needing to make this really difficult choice, which ultimately resulted in his death and grief for his other brother and the entire tribe. Further, and skip this if you don't want any spoilers, his actualization of the rage inside of him resulted in a bear cub becoming orphaned, possibly meaning that this bear cub wouldn't survive. Now, he could just accept that that's how things turned out. However, Kenai acknowledges that he has the ability to reduce the impact of his choices on the world by looking after the bear cub and making sure that he can survive. Of course, this wasn't a conclusion that Kenai just came up with. It was actually a lesson he learnt from Coda, the young cub that was grateful for his misfortunes and forgiving for those who had changed his life. By showing Kenai that he was valuable to him, Kenai felt that sense of duty and responsibility towards Coda, opting to sacrifice his human life to keep Coda safe. And so Kenai grew from a boy to a man, a story of accountability and love in Denahi's eyes. Now, let's look at it from a spiritual lens. Kenai walks into the ceremony knowing what he wants out of it. But what he wanted wasn't his place on Earth or in the tribe. He had a bigger reason of being here than he had ever thought. But his pride got in the way of considering what his totem could mean and how it fits in with him now and what he needs to work on. I mean, we could all see that working on love and compassion for others was definitely something that Kenai needed to do by looking at his relationship with his brothers. Just like Denahi had a long way to go in being wise.
Just because his totem is wisdom doesn't mean he's wise. I mean, look at him.
He loves me. He loves me now. Hey, whoa!
Hi, Denahi.
Oh, hi. Oh.
And so Kenai propels himself into a lesson that he needed to learn the hard way. And that's what happens when we move against the grain of our existence. Humans are not built to be heartless or self-absorbed. But when we act that way, the consequences that will come because of it will come back to bite us. And it can seem that something which is negative in the moment is a positive thing in the future because it provides an opportunity to learn and grow. For the majority of the time that Kenai was a bear, he doesn't really understand why Sitka had turned him into one. But Coda showed Kenai a new perspective on life. How to be grateful for challenges, positive about changes in your life, and the impact of human decisions on the world around them. Yes, we are the predators on the top of the food chain. Further, his meeting with the other bears at the salmon run allowed Kenai to stop viewing bears as the monsters, but creatures just like him, with a family that they care about, with a community they share, with happiness and sadness. This new lens outside his selfish view allows him to develop empathy and compassion for others. And if you want to skip this bit, so when he finds out that he had murdered Coda's mother out of anger, he realizes that he was the monster, not her. Just as we said in our discussion of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, which will be in the link up here, a monster is defined by their actions, not their appearance. And so Kenai comes to the realization that he needs to change his monstrous ways so that he could become a better version of himself. And the best way that he could think of doing this is by being that bear of love for Coda, filling the gap that he had caused in the universe. And so by letting go of the emotions that had stunned his ability of being a better being, Kenai became a man by becoming a bear. A story of understanding and growth in Sitka's eyes. Though both the material and the spiritual lens of the story come to the same conclusion, they tell very different tales. One of a man swallowed by grief and realizing by not processing his grief properly, he has inflicted pain on others and spread the grief rather than using a healthy outlet to live with it. Where the other tells of the tale of a boy tall with pride, not realizing the consequences of his selfish actions and how they can impact the world, and how only by looking at life through the lens of others can we truly appreciate what we have gone through and what we must do. What a gem of a story, and one I would highly recommend for children, especially in a world so egocentric. It's not an easy watch, as it can get emotional at times with depictions of death, grief, and anger, and it's not so colorful like The Lion King. But I feel that the story is closer to home than The Lion King. and it's definitely more relatable when it comes to processing pain and understanding the consequences of one's actions. Two things which I feel like The Lion King doesn't do very well, but we'll talk about that in a later video. Because this review is about the beautiful, tear-jerking Brother Bear. That's the super underrated Brother Bear. If you want to watch this satisfying movie for yourself, please use a streaming platform that doesn't support the violation of human rights or the spread of negativity in the world. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on next week's drop. And remember, be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.